The phone rang at 2 a.m. I was still in the hospital, heart monitor beeping steadily when I heard her voice. "Mom, I'm getting married. The apartment and car sold, bye." Just like that. After everything I gave up to raise her alone, after sacrificing my dreams so she could chase hers, she hung up like I was a stranger. But she forgot one thing, a detail buried deep in the paperwork. A trap I left for anyone foolish enough to believe love made me blind. You see, I taught literature for 30 years, but I studied people longer. And that man she married, he's made a career out of charming women like me. Except I'm not his target this time. I'm the storm he never saw coming. And this time, the lesson won't be in a classroom. It'll be in a courtroom. I never meant to become a single mother. When James died in that car crash, Hannah was only 4. I still remember the softness of her cheeks as she clung to my legs at the funeral, too young to understand the permanence of death, but old enough to feel something had shattered. I was 35 then, with a master's thesis halfway done and dreams of teaching at a university. But dreams are fragile things when rent is due and mouths must be fed. I dropped out of graduate school the week after the funeral. My professors were kind. Some offered to delay my thesis. One even offered a babysitting referral. But I knew what I had to do. I applied to every public school district in the county and took the first job that called back. It paid just enough to cover childcare and groceries, with nothing left over for dreams. I taught English to 9th graders during the day, tutored seniors at night, and cleaned classrooms after hours for extra pay. I remember eating ramen in the staff lounge while grading essays, telling myself it was just for a few years, just until Hannah was older. Just until she could understand why I wasn't at every ballet recital or birthday party. But the years piled up. So did the compromises. I stopped buying books for myself, stopped going out with friends, stopped buying anything that wasn't for Hannah. Every dollar went toward her future. I remember walking past a boutique once and seeing a wool coat I would have killed for in my 20s. I ran my fingers over it and walked away. That month, Hannah needed braces. When she turned 10, I took out a second mortgage on the house to pay for her violin lessons and her science camp. She showed talent in both, and I couldn't bear the thought of limiting her because of money. So I sacrificed sleep, took on summer school teaching, and started selling lesson plans online just to make it all work. I told myself, she's worth it. Every hour, every penny, every ache in your bones. I kept a small shoebox under my bed, filled with Hannah's drawings, report cards, and notes. On the hardest nights, I'd take them out like prayers. "You're the best mom ever," she had scribbled in crayon when she was 7. One teacher-parent conference, the counselor told me, "Hannah talks about you like you're a superhero." I cried in the car afterward, not because I needed the praise, but because it meant she saw me, even if, just for a moment. When she graduated high school, I cried harder than she did, not out of sadness, but relief that I'd made it, that I hadn't failed, that all the quiet sacrifices had built something solid. I gifted her a used car I'd saved for 5 years to buy. She shrieked when she saw it and hugged me like she was 5 again. That night, I allowed myself a glass of wine, my first in over a decade. College came next. Hannah got partial scholarships, but not enough. So I dipped into my retirement. "It's just money," I said. "What else am I saving for if not her?" I sold my grandmother's wedding ring to help cover dorm expenses. I never told Hannah. She thought the financial aid covered more than it did. I let her believe it. A mother's pride isn't always about what she has. It's what she hides so her child can soar. Then came the apartment. It was a modest 2-bedroom near the university. I'd spent 6 months researching safe neighborhoods, good lighting, nearby groceries. I bought it under a trust in my name, but told her it was hers, her first step into adulthood. She cried when I handed her the keys, then jumped around the living room like a kid in a candy store. I stood at the door and memorized the moment. It felt like closing a chapter. My baby girl had grown. I thought we were close. Not best friends. We didn't text daily or share makeup tips like some mothers and daughters, but bonded in the way steel bonds to fire, forged through struggle. I thought she knew how deep my love went, how I'd bled silently through the years so she could fly without weights on her ankles. That's why the call hit me like it did. But that comes later. This chapter isn't about betrayal. It's about love. About years spent building a life around someone else's dreams and not regretting it, because their joy became your own. It's about a mother who gave so quietly, so completely, that when the floor finally fell out from under her, she barely made a sound. The antiseptic scent was sharp, like a warning. Machines beeped rhythmically around me, their cold precision matching the way time passed here. Clinical, slow, and unforgiving. The ceiling tiles above my hospital bed hadn't changed in 3 days. Neither had the ache in my chest. The heart attack wasn't a surprise. What surprised me was how quiet everything felt afterward. No visitors, no flowers, just white walls, the rustle of nurse scrubs, and the occasional chirp of a heart monitor. Then the phone rang, 2:03 a.m. I thought it might be a nurse, maybe a late-night checkup call from a colleague, but the name on the screen made my fingers tremble. Hannah. "Mom," her voice clipped, emotionless. "I'm getting married." My mind stumbled like a record skipping. What? I'm getting married. Tomorrow, in Vegas. Logan and I decided not to wait. Each word fell like ice down my spine. "Hannah, slow down. I sold the car and the apartment. We used the money for the wedding and a small honeymoon in Cabo." Silence. The kind that suffocates. "The apartment?" I repeated, barely recognizing my own voice. "And the car? They were in my name." No, they weren't. They never were. Not legally, not where it mattered. But I said nothing. Not yet. Instead, I sat there with my heart pounding, half from betrayal, half from the rising pressure in my chest. If the heart monitor could speak, it might have shouted for help, but the nurse wasn't due for another hour. I took a slow breath. "I see," I said, steadying my voice. "Anyway, I won't be around for a while. Don't try to call. We're starting fresh." And just like that, the little girl who used to call me Supermom, who once danced around a new apartment with pure joy, cut me out like I was an expired coupon. But she forgot something. There was a beat of silence before I spoke again. "You forgot one thing." "What?" Her voice turned sharp, almost irritated. I smiled, not out of cruelty, but out of preparation, out of knowing this day might come, out of love twisted into caution after years of subtle distance and Logan's sudden appearance. "I'll let you find out," I said gently, like a mother tucking in a child who didn't yet know the monster under the bed was real. Then I hung up. Not because I was angry, because I needed silence to process just how deeply she had changed, and how calmly I had expected it. You see, when Logan entered our lives, I felt it. Not a thunderclap, not some dramatic scene, just a shift. He smiled too much, knew too little about everything, had no photos of his own family. He complimented me in ways that didn't quite feel earned. And he always asked questions about Hannah's car, the neighborhood of her apartment, how I managed things alone on a teacher's pension. He smelled like strategy. So I did what teachers rarely do. I outplanned him. Months earlier, I'd updated the trust. The apartment, legally speaking, still belonged to me. The car title? Reissued under my name when I refinanced my insurance policy. I let Hannah believe she had full control. She needed that illusion. But I had already seen the way Logan was rearranging her world, one suggestion at a time. And I wasn't going to let him gut mine. In the days after the call, I requested my discharge early. The doctor warned me to take it easy, avoid stress. I promised I would. But what he didn't know was that preparing for betrayal is oddly therapeutic. The moment I stepped back into my home, I opened the locked filing cabinet in my study and pulled out the documents I'd organized 6 months ago. Property trust agreements, bank authorizations, notarized asset declarations, all airtight. I'd spent my adult life reading contracts, first as a tenant, later as a co-signer, finally as a property owner. I knew loopholes better than most landlords. Logan had made one mistake. He thought a mother's love was unconditional, and therefore unintelligent. He underestimated me. That night, I made tea, sat by the fireplace, and reread the trust papers like they were old love letters. I felt no joy in what was coming, no vengeance, just clarity. I hadn't lost my daughter, not yet, but I had lost her trust. And to win it back, I needed to fight, not with fists or tears, but with facts. The next morning, I made 3 phone calls. My attorney, a private investigator, and a friend from my old school district who now worked in real estate fraud prevention. War wasn't coming. It had already begun, and I was ready. I first met Logan at Hannah's birthday dinner, an evening that should have been full of warmth, laughter, and candlelight reflections. Instead, it was all too polished, too choreographed. Hannah had chosen a trendy farm-to-table bistro downtown, the kind of place that served food on slate and called salads foraged greens. Logan arrived precisely on time, wearing a tailored blazer and a grin that looked screen-tested. He reached for my hand with the confidence of a man accustomed to closing deals. "Mrs. Monroe," he said, "I've heard so much about you." "Elaine," I corrected gently, noting how firm his grip was. Not strong, just intentional. He complimented the food before tasting it, called the ambiance charming, and praised Hannah with lines that felt plucked from a dating app. I couldn't put my finger on it then, but something about him felt overproduced. His charm didn't land, it hovered. Throughout the evening, he steered every conversation toward career talk, his consulting firm, his experience with high-level strategy, vague mentions of client optimization. None of it meant anything. I taught high schoolers for 30 years. I've seen kids bluff through book reports better than he explained his job. But Hannah was glowing. She hung on his every word, eyes wide, voice giddy. At one point, she said, "Logan thinks I should start my own business. He believes in me more than anyone ever has." I smiled, but something in my chest tightened. Later that night, I Googled his firm. No website, no LinkedIn, just a few generic mentions on business forums that looked planted. I didn't confront Hannah. I didn't want to come off as jealous or territorial, but I bookmarked every link and emailed myself the pages, just in case they disappeared. In the weeks that followed, Logan became a fixture in our lives. Sunday dinners shifted from cozy to curated. He always offered to help cook, but somehow ended up on the couch with a glass of wine while I basted the roast. He brought wine, always expensive, and made a show of complimenting my kitchen. Such smart design, Elaine. These countertops are timeless. Countertops? Who notices countertops at Sunday dinner? One evening, he asked how I'd managed to buy Hannah's apartment. "Teachers don't get paid what they deserve," he said. "You must have made some savvy investments." That was the moment my suspicion bloomed into certainty, not because of what he said, but how he said it. He wasn't impressed. He was assessing. Weeks turned into months. Hannah stopped coming by on her own. When I called, she was always heading into a meeting or about to hop on a Zoom. If we made plans, Logan usually tagged along. The once spontaneous girl who used to show up in yoga pants with Thai takeout had become formal, controlled. I brought it up one day, delicately. "Honey, we haven't had a mom and me day in a while, just us. Remember how we used to grab lattes and people watch at the marina?" A pause. "I'm just swamped lately, Mom. Logan says I overcommit, and he's right. I need to protect my time." Protect it from me? She must have sensed the sting in my silence because she added, "We can plan something next month?" But next month never came. Instead, I started receiving texts like running behind or Logan's not feeling well. I stopped pushing. I knew this pattern. I'd seen it in students whose partners isolated them from friends, teachers, mentors. Hannah wasn't being cruel. She was being managed. One afternoon, I dropped by her apartment with a bag of groceries, her favorites. Almond milk, dried mango, the good kind of pasta she used to beg me for in college. I knocked 3 times, waited. Just as I was turning away, the door opened a crack. "Mom," she said, surprise flashing across her face. "You should have called." "I brought groceries," I said, holding up the bag. A moment of hesitation, then she opened the door wider. The apartment felt different, sparsely furnished, a little colder than I remembered. A framed photo of us that once sat by the window was gone. In its place, a sleek gold sculpture that didn't suit her at all. "Logan redecorated," she said, noticing my glance. "Minimalist style." I nodded, hiding the ache in my throat. She took the groceries and thanked me, but she didn't offer coffee, didn't invite me to sit. After a few minutes of small talk, she walked me to the door with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Next time, just text, okay?" I hugged her tighter than usual. She didn't pull away, but she didn't hug back. As I drove home, I replayed everything. The calculated compliments, the disappearing conversations, the subtle redirection of loyalty. Logan hadn't just walked into Hannah's life. He had rearranged it, room by room, thought by thought. And I had a sinking feeling that the apartment and car weren't the only things he was after. I decided to play weak, not pitiful, just irrelevant. It wasn't hard. After the hospital, I moved a little slower, let my hand tremble while reaching for cups, paused when walking up the stairs. I left voice messages that sounded scattered and slightly confused. I didn't answer texts right away. When I spoke to Hannah, I was always tired. "Just resting, sweetie," I'd say. "The heart takes time." She started speaking more freely, sharing bits and pieces, slipping up, thinking maybe that I wasn't sharp enough anymore to notice inconsistencies. I pretended not to hear the tension behind her cheerful updates, the sudden mentions of joint decisions with Logan, the way she said, "We've been looking into refinancing," instead of, "I've been." She thought I was fading. That was the plan. Then came the visit. Logan showed up on a Wednesday afternoon, unannounced, all polished teeth and fake warmth. "Elaine," he said, walking into my living room like it belonged to him. "Thought I'd check in, see how you're holding up." He brought flowers, cheap ones. I accepted them with a nod. "Thanks, you caught me right before my nap." "That's fine, won't take long," he said casually. "Actually, I was hoping you could help me locate a few documents. Hannah thought they might be here. Something about the apartment title, just to get everything squared away." I raised an eyebrow. "Oh?" He laughed. "You know how paperwork is. Always something missing, nothing urgent." I moved slowly, deliberately, opened the hallway closet, pulled down a labeled box, Property Archive. Inside was everything he hoped to see, and one thing he didn't, a blinking green light hidden in the corner of the bookshelf. The camera had been recording since he arrived. I handed him a folder. "This might be it. Mind going through it yourself? My eyesight's not what it used to be." "Sure, of course," he said, already flipping through pages, phone in hand. I watched him discreetly scan a few, snap photos of others. He looked completely at ease, like a man who thought the safe was already open. He didn't notice the small blinking lens behind the fake bookend. When he left 20 minutes later, folder in hand and false reassurances in his voice, I sat back down, opened the laptop under my side table, and replayed the footage. Every second, every image, every lie. The next morning, I emailed the full video, along with a copy of the property trust and title history, to an old colleague, Martha Quinn, now a real estate attorney and fraud litigator. We hadn't spoken in 5 years, but she responded within the hour. "Elaine," she wrote, "this is big, and what he did inside your home, possibly illegal depending on what he does with the information. But you're covered. Your trust is solid. Still, I'd like to run this past someone in title insurance." "Please do," I replied. "And one more thing. I need you to look into a name." And the fake transfer forms Logan had skimmed through had a signature. The notarizing lawyer's name leapt off the page like a ghost from my past. Jeffrey Landers. 20 years ago, Landers had tried to swindle the school district I worked for, forging contracts that funneled money into shell companies under his name. I was one of the whistleblowers. He lost his license. Temporarily. Apparently, not for long enough. Martha called later that day, her voice sharp. "Elaine, you're not going to like this." "Tell me anyway." "That signature is real. Landers is back in business. Sort of. He operates under a limited certification. Technically legal, but deeply unethical. He's been involved in at least 3 shady property transfers in the past 2 years, all involving elderly women. 2 settled out of court. 1 disappeared entirely. My blood went cold. This isn't just Logan manipulating Hannah, she continued. This smells like a coordinated scheme, maybe even a ring. I thought of Logan's polished surface, the hollow charm, the well-timed compliments. How quickly he moved in, how deftly he isolated Hannah, how brazenly he tried to photocopy trust documents in my own house. It wasn't just predatory behavior, it was practiced, refined, weaponized. I need everything you can find on Landers, I told Martha. Licenses, transactions, aliases. I want to know who's behind this and how many women they've targeted. I'll start digging, she promised. But be careful, Elaine. If they think you're a threat, they won't just walk away. I hung up, stared out the window, and felt a cold resolve settle in my bones. They thought I was weak. They thought I was alone. But I've spent a lifetime reading between the lines, and I'm done playing defenseless. I disappeared quietly, like a leaf slipping from a branch in the middle of the night. No announcements, no forwarding address, no goodbye notes. I just vanished. 3 weeks after Logan's visit, I packed my belongings, carefully, methodically, and moved to a rented cottage in a sleepy coastal town where no one knew my name. I left behind the house I'd worked 3 decades to pay off, the neighborhood where I'd memorized every dog's bark and every wind chime melody. I turned off my phone, deleted social media, redirected mail to a post office box 2 counties away. I waited. No calls, no messages, not even from Hannah. I wasn't surprised. The last thing I said to her before I left was a voicemail she never responded to. "You'll understand someday." Maybe that was selfish or cowardly. Maybe it was both. But I couldn't stay and watch her unravel herself around Logan's manipulation. Couldn't bear to see the bright girl I raised dim her own light in exchange for validation from a man who treated her like a portfolio acquisition. So I left. The cottage I found was small. Just 2 bedrooms, 1 bath, and a wraparound porch that overlooked a quiet inlet. The garden had been neglected for years, tangled with weeds and dry soil. I spent my first mornings kneeling in the dirt, hands blistered from pulling roots, knees aching. By the 3rd week, tomatoes were sprouting. Mint began pushing up through the gravel. I spoke to no one except the owner of the corner market, who thought I was someone's grandmother recovering from grief. I didn't correct him. I started keeping a journal, not the pretty kind with inspirational quotes and lavender paper, a plain leather-bound book, the kind that begs for honesty. I wrote everything, not just about Logan or Hannah, but about the early years, the late nights, the silent sacrifices. I wrote about the day James died and the exact sound the phone made when the officers said the word collision. I wrote about Hannah's first fever, about the time I sold my wedding ring to pay her college deposit, and how I cried in the car, not because of the ring, but because it was the last thing I had left of her father. I wrote like someone trying to excavate herself from under decades of quiet. Days became weeks. My hair grew longer, my bones loosened in the ocean breeze. My voice returned, rusted at first, like an old gate, but steady. I watched the tide go out every evening like clockwork. Something about that rhythm, the taking, then the returning, comforted me. It reminded me that even absence was a form of movement. Still, the loneliness was sharp. At night, I lay awake, waiting for footsteps that never came, for a phone buzz that never lit up. I imagined Hannah reaching for her phone, fingers hovering, then pulling back. Did she miss me? Did she believe I had abandoned her? Or worse, did she not notice at all? I didn't know which was more painful. One morning, I walked the trail behind the cottage, past the dunes and salt grass, to a bench that overlooked the cliffs. I sat there with my journal in my lap, watching the seagulls circle the surf, and I wrote the words I'd been avoiding. Maybe I was never her mother. Maybe I was just a vessel she passed through on her way to somewhere else. I closed the journal quickly, as if the sentence might leap off the page and swallow me whole. I cried then, not loud, not messy, just the kind of crying that leaks out of you after you've been brave for too long. There's a particular grief that comes not from death, but from still being alive while someone erases you from their life. In town, I passed a mother and daughter one afternoon, arms linked, laughing at something I couldn't hear. The daughter had Hannah's eyes. I turned my face away quickly, pretending to examine a produce stand. That night, I cooked chicken soup like I used to when Hannah had a cold. I made enough for two. Then I ate alone, one spoonful at a time, watching steam curl from the bowl like a ghost of the past. By the 6th week, I stopped checking my old email, stopped wondering if the mailbox would hold a letter. I stopped reaching, but I didn't stop hoping. Hope, it turns out, is stubborn. It survives exile. It grows like mint between cracks in forgotten gardens. Still, there was a part of me that accepted the new role I'd been cast in. The lonely old woman in the story no one remembers until she's gone. The one who loved too hard, gave too much. The one who disappeared into the waves and left nothing behind but questions. Sometimes, when the wind was strong enough, I imagined it carried pieces of my voice across the distance to wherever Hannah was. I imagined her sitting on a couch, Logan next to her, scrolling her phone and pausing. Pausing, but not calling. Not yet. The thing about disappearing is, it gives you time. Time to listen, to observe, to dig. And I didn't waste it. 3 days after arriving at the cottage, I'd mailed an unmarked envelope to a name I hadn't used in years. Marcus Hill, a former private investigator who once helped expose a corruption ring in the district school board. He was discreet, meticulous, and above all, owed me a favor. In the envelope, I included a photo of Logan, the fake transfer forms, and one simple request. Tell me who he really is. 6 weeks passed in near silence, except for occasional encrypted emails from Marcus with cryptic subject lines. Layer 1 cracked. Alias confirmed. Trail widening. What he uncovered wasn't just unsettling. It was a tangled web of deception spanning years, states, and identities. Logan Pierce wasn't his real name. He'd also been known as Gavin Doyle in Arizona and Lucas Merritt in Oregon. Under each name, there was a woman, a house, a financial collapse. The pattern was grotesquely familiar. Charm, trust, joint accounts, business investments, and then disappearance. 2 restraining orders, 1 pending lawsuit, and a cold case investigation involving a missing $300,000 from a widow's inheritance trust. I stared at the report for hours, hands trembling, bile rising in my throat. The man who'd wrapped himself around my daughter's life was a parasite, one who'd perfected his technique over a decade of reinvention. But that wasn't the deepest twist. Marcus's final email read simply, "You're not the only one watching him." Attached was a scanned letter, postmarked from Sacramento. It was handwritten in careful script and addressed to Marcus, dated 2 weeks before I'd contacted him. I believe I was married to Logan Pierce, though he called himself Lucas Merritt at the time. He drained my retirement, disappeared, and left me with false paperwork. I've been watching him for over a year. He's changed names again. If someone else is tracking him, please contact me. I want in. Her name was Natalie Kerr. The next day, Marcus arranged a secure Zoom call. I sat at my kitchen table, sipping cold tea, heart racing as her face appeared on the screen. She was younger than I expected, mid-40s maybe, but her eyes looked older, wiser, wounded. Elaine Monroe, I introduced myself. Natalie Kerr, or what's left of her, she said dryly. We didn't waste time. Within 10 minutes, we were trading war stories. Same charming phrases, same vague job, same dreams about starting fresh in the Caribbean. We laughed once, bitterly, when we realized Logan had even used the same fake honeymoon destination on both of us, Cabo. Natalie shared files she'd collected, screenshots of Logan's old dating profiles, emails he'd sent under other aliases, even surveillance photos from a private tracker she'd hired when he vanished. One image froze me, Logan in a parking lot slipping a manila envelope to a tall man in sunglasses. "That's not just anyone," Natalie said. "That man, he works for a known offshore financial facilitator. He helps people disappear money. Quietly. Permanently." We dug deeper night after night. I dusted off my teacher instincts. categorizing evidence, building timelines, cross-referencing aliases. Natalie compiled bank transfers, matched handwriting samples, even tracked license plate numbers from rental cars Logan had used across state lines. Each puzzle piece brought us closer to one horrifying truth. Logan wasn't planning to just con Hannah. He was preparing to vanish. For good, with every penny he could extract. On the 8th night, we found it. A document buried in a fake Dropbox account Natalie had access to. An export permit draft masked as an international consulting contract. Hidden in the metadata was Logan's newest alias, Ethan Blair. The document referenced a wire transfer totaling over $520,000, scheduled to route through a shell company registered in the Cayman Islands. The account number matched the one listed on Hannah's property sale forms. The apartment, the car, Hannah's inheritance, gone, if we didn't act fast. Natalie leaned in close to the webcam that night, her voice tight. He's preparing to move that money within days. Once it's out of the country, it's untraceable. We need to stop him now. I nodded, pulse pounding. Then we expose him. But we can't go straight to the police. He's too careful. He'll disappear before they even process the report. I exhaled. So we make it public, carefully, and we catch him in the act. Natalie smiled, grim and determined. We burn his whole playbook down. That night, I closed my laptop and sat in silence, staring at the waves in the distance. No longer just a mother mourning distance, no longer just a victim. Now, I was part of something bigger, a reckoning. Hannah had always believed in new beginnings. That's what she told herself when she moved into the downtown condo with Logan, a space they chose together with high ceilings and too much white, like a blank page ready to be filled. The first few weeks were blissful. Logan cooked breakfast. They laughed over wine. He talked about building an empire, and she believed him because believing made her feel powerful, necessary. But by the 3rd month, the cracks began to show. It started with small things, a sharp look when she bought a dress without asking, a passive-aggressive comment when she added an old college friend on Instagram. "You don't need distractions," he said. "You've got me." Then came the financial anxiety. The joint account they'd opened after the wedding, Logan's idea, began dwindling rapidly. Hannah noticed it during a grocery run. Her card declined. She laughed it off, blaming the chip reader, and paid with a credit card instead. But that night, she checked their banking app and her stomach dropped. $3,800 had vanished over the past 10 days. "Logan?" she asked, phone in hand. He was lounging on the couch, scrolling through sports highlights. "There's a bunch of withdrawals here. Big ones." He didn't even flinch. "I've been moving funds around, investment stuff. Don't worry about it." "But that was supposed to be for bills, and you're not the financial brain in this relationship, babe," he said lightly, still staring at his screen. "Let me handle it. You'll thank me later." Hannah bit her tongue. She'd heard this tone before, from him, from her own voice years ago when she'd used it on her mother. Condescending, dismissive, confident without reason. But this was different. This was warning. That week, Logan changed the password to the bank account. He said it was for security. And he also started carrying both of their phones with him when he left the house, claiming his was out of storage and he needed to use hers for photos. Once, when she tried to take her phone back before bed, he raised his voice for the first time. "Jesus, Hannah, don't be so paranoid. I don't go through your things." But he did. He began deleting texts from her friends. When she confronted him, he turned the guilt back on her like a weapon. "Your friends don't support us. They're jealous. They're trying to poison what we're building." She stopped arguing, stopped texting, stopped talking to anyone but him. And in that quiet vacuum, she started shrinking. Every time she looked in the mirror, she saw less of herself and more of the woman Logan described, sensitive, reactive, incapable of managing real life. He said she was lucky to have him, that no one else would understand her, that he was the only person who ever saw her true potential. Then, one night, everything changed. Logan had fallen asleep on the couch. half a bottle of whiskey still uncapped on the table. Hannah tiptoed past him toward the kitchen when his phone buzzed. Her name, not hers, appeared on the screen. Emilia. Something inside her stirred. She shouldn't look. She knew that. But something deeper, something that sounded like her mother's voice, whispered, "Look." She picked up the phone. No password. The message preview read, "She's still buying it. Told you she's a puppet." Hannah's breath caught in her throat. Hands trembling, she opened the messaging app and scrolled up. There, in stark black and white pixels, was her husband, Logan, laughing about her, mocking her, planning things. Easy mark, got access to her finances in under a month. She thinks I'm building a business. I'm building an escape hatch. She's the dumbest of the three so far. Honestly, it's getting boring. Hannah dropped the phone. Literally. It hit the tile with a crack. Logan stirred on the couch, but didn't wake. She backed out of the room, heart pounding, blood rushing in her ears. That night, she sat in the bathroom with the shower running, door locked, and sobbed into a towel. Not because she was heartbroken, because she was ashamed. Every warning, every red flag, every awkward conversation with her mother that she'd dismissed as controlling. Every instinct she'd buried beneath the thrill of being wanted by someone like him. He didn't love her. He never had. She was just convenient, like a bridge to something bigger, like a key to a vault. The next morning, Logan acted normal. He even kissed her forehead and brought her coffee. But Hannah couldn't look him in the eye. The mirror had shattered, and all she could see now were shards. That afternoon, she dug through their filing cabinet while Logan was out. He never kept much paper. He was too careful. But in the back of an old manila folder labeled taxes, she found a single printed email to a name she didn't recognize. Subject line, "Final transfer schedule, Cayman account." She didn't understand everything it said, but she understood enough. He was moving money, a lot of it, out of the country, soon. The next morning, I carefully arranged the evidence folder on Hannah's doorstep. Inside, printed screenshots of Logan's mocking texts, bank statements showing drained funds, the secretly recorded video of him rummaging through my home, and paperwork exposing his aliases. On top, I placed a sealed letter addressed to her. It was titled "Just Once Daughter." I didn't expect her to open it right away, just that it would land, make its weight known. Son, you have two choices when you read this package. One, hide it like you always have and wait for your heart, your fortune, and your life to be destroyed. Two, face the truth and start over with understanding. I will not pick up the phone when you call. I told you one last time that you will understand. I really do. Mom. Then I left. Hannah's hands trembled when she opened the package. Sheets of shock, confusion, terror. Her fingers hovered over each document, tears blurring her vision. But when she read the note, everything changed. The war between us wasn't between me and Logan. It was between illusion and reality. Slowly, methodically, she began to research, on her own. The emails about property sale, when run through a legal checker, revealed one critical clause. The apartment deed had a 5-year lock, a condition hidden in the trust documents where I had quietly inserted a clause prohibiting sale or transfer for 5 years. She had signed contracts. She had believed she owned the condo. She did not. Not legal title? Not yet. I'd built legal scaffolding for her future, but I never removed that lock until I was ready. Why? Because paperwork, like love, is only powerful when understood. Aging parents make deals, but creditors and predators prey on ignorance. And Logan assumed miscalculation. He misread the ledger. Instead, he'd triggered a trap no amount of sleight of hand could escape. Meanwhile, in Logan's office, his desk immaculate and cold, Hannah sat with her hands shaking as she accessed his sealed browser history. It took 5 minutes to find them. Flight itineraries, boarding passes, cloak and dagger. He'd purchased a ticket one way to a country she recognized from offshore trusts. A ticket for one. Logan wasn't planning to include her in the escape. He was planning to leave her behind. Hannah let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. disbelief, denial, rage. But worst of all, deep, unthinkable sorrow. She called me then. My voicemail box greeted her. No message, no option to leave a voicemail, just ring, ring, silence. She sent a single text. "Mom, I understand." And after that, silence again. Instead of panicking, she let the grief crush her, allowed herself to feel it all. The betrayal, shame, fear, self-blame. At night, she lay awake in our old farmhouse bedroom, surrounded by the emptiness where safety used to be. The city lights beyond her windows pulsed with life she could never return to confidently. Days passed. She barely ate. She barely cleaned. When she did, the crumbs didn't matter. Nothing else did, except understanding. Our relationship had always been one of quiet stability, but now it felt like she'd lost both home and anchor. One afternoon, I received an email from her, addressed to my discarded address. The subject line said, "Can we meet?" No details. She didn't have to. I knew. I sat at the same small table in the cottage, journal open, eyes on the waves. Then I grabbed my car keys. She arrived by dusk, her face pale, eyes haunted. There was no polite knock. She entered. No hug, no acknowledgement, just a look, hollow, broken. We sat across from each other at a creaky wooden table, the table I cooked on, the one she once turned into a homework station at midnight. I poured her tea. It sat between us like a ceasefire. I didn't speak. She didn't either. Finally, she took a shaky breath. "Mom," her voice cracked, "why didn't you say everything?" She half asked, half accused. I nodded. I'd already planned to say nothing yet. Let her speak first. I felt stupid. I felt like I was crazy until I saw the clause. The parent clause placed in the contract, 5 years lock. That means they can't actually transfer it. She poked the trust documents. I nodded again. "It means he miscalculated," I said gently. He moved forward, thinking it was fleshed out, but legally it wasn't. "You tricked me," she whispered. "I protected you." Her eyes filled. We held the silence. Then Hannah's voice shook. "He bought that ticket," she said. "One way, only one seat." Her sobs came next. I shifted closer. I put my arm around her. She didn't pull away. Not at first. Then she collapsed. Not in anger, but in grief. Because she'd lost more than money. She'd lost her belief. In herself. In love. In the mother she thought she was pushing away. When she lifted her head, tears soaked her cheeks. She said softly, "I've never felt more lost. I feel like I lost me, and now I might lose everything else." That was the line. That fracture between anger and despair. That moment where grief breaks open. I held her firm. Neither flood nor rage, just steady presence. "No," I said quietly. "You didn't lose me." She looked, frightened and unsure. "You almost lost yourself," I continued. "That can be rebuilt." She sank deeper into the chair and buried her face in her hands. "I don't know how." I reached over and opened the trust folder again. "I didn't sell anything," I said, "and the deal's not done. He miscalculated." She looked at me then. Long seconds. Then the door opened. The sky had turned gray-blue. Night was coming. But in that moment, we were still here, still fighting, still mother and daughter. When Hannah knocked on the door of my old home, now empty, I hesitated for a heartbeat. The house had belonged to me. Me, not her, yet it felt wrong to invite her into rooms that once held her entire childhood. But that was precisely what I did. I opened the door to find her standing there, shrinking into the frame, pale, fragile, and haunted. It had been weeks since she'd spoken, since I'd spoken. No apologies, no explanations, just silence. And then, finally, her standing in the dusk outside what used to be her sanctuary. I gestured her inside. No words passed between us. We sat at the long kitchen table, beneath the yellowed light. I served the vegetable soup she once loved, the one I perfected to soothe her stomach after nights of school stress and heartbreaks. The same recipe she'd always said reminded her of childhood Sunday dinners. She lifted the spoon, took a small sip, and paused. I felt her glance toward me, but she didn't look away. I didn't flinch. When she finally spoke, her voice was quiet. "I don't know what to say." "So, say nothing," I answered softly. The spoon settled back in her hand. She breathed in deeply. That breath carried years of accusation, shame, loneliness, and fear. I closed my eyes a moment, remembering how many of those breaths I'd taken alone while singing her lullabies in the dark, working second jobs to pay for braces, crying quietly after her high school graduation when she said, "Thank you, Mom." I remembered promising her father on his deathbed, "I will take care of her." I had done that. I had tried, and now I just needed to be alongside her. We didn't say sorry. We held hands across the table. When she finally allowed me to guide her to my study, the room still smelled faintly of old books and lavender, the scent I always used to calm her nerves before tests. I brought out my leather-bound journal. Pages of sacrifice, love, thoughts turned inward through nights when there was no one to talk to. She flipped through the pages slowly. There were sketches of her as a child, letters I'd written explaining why I never splurged on myself, notes to my younger self about what it meant to raise a daughter alone. I watched tears wet her cheeks as she read. "Mom, I never knew." I paused as she closed it. I just didn't understand. There was no blame in her voice, only raw pain. That night, she told me everything. How Logan had controlled her. How she signed documents without really knowing what they meant. How she blamed me for trusting too much. For doing what mothers do, believing in their child, locking down resources so they can grow. That may have been my flaw, but it was never betrayal. It was love. Morning light filtered through old curtains by the time she slept. I watched her from the doorway as if I could trace back every moment she became someone who would bend so easily. Then without warning, she stirred and looked at me. "I want to help you clean up," she said hoarsely. I blinked. "Just whatever you need." That single sentence broke something inside both of us. It was unclear, but it was enough. We spent the rest of the day sorting through photo albums. There were Halloween costumes, prom pictures, scribbled notes. "Love you, Mom," lost in time. Each photo pulled her back through decade by decade. Infancy, school concerts, graduation. We cried. Not loud, not dramatic, quiet release, the kind you feel in your bones. After lunch, leftovers from yesterday's soup, we walked to the backyard. I showed her the garden at the cottage where I'd planted the mint and tomatoes. She laughed when she tasted the first tomato, too acidic, but smiled when she bit into the second. She held on to that moment like a lifeline. "This was always your gift to me," she said. I nodded. "It's yours now," I replied. She looked taken aback. "I want to take care of it," she said. "With you." We dug our hands into the soil together, me guiding her fingers out weeds, her teaching me the names of plants in her head, petunia, basil, rosemary, side by side, dirt under our nails, sunlight between our shoulders. At dusk, I showed her my journal again. This time, I let her read an entry written the night before I vanished. "I cannot fix this. I cannot be both savior and perpetrator, but maybe silence will force understanding. Maybe absence will open a door." She closed the book. "And it did," she whispered. That night, we sat on the porch with mugs of tea that smelled like lavender and salty sea air. The sky was soft gray, and she rested her head on my shoulder. "I'm sorry, Mom," she said. "I love you," I replied. We stayed that way, neither saying much else. Over the next day, we made decisions together. What to do with Logan's property, with the house, with the trust, how to notify authorities, the fraud unit, immigration, offshore investigators. She was terrified, of course, but she also looked like she was waking up. That evening, I drove her to her old apartment with her suitcase and donated her clothes to a local shelter. She insisted on packing only what she needed, leaving behind Logan's belongings, his records, everything. "Clean start," she said. Standing in front of the building, we held each other for a long moment. "You'll find your way back," I told her. She nodded. The final scene of the day found us at the cottage's dining table, working together on a new page in my journal. A list of things next to do: filing reports, contacting victims, arranging press interviews. She looked up at me. "I want to help other women," she said. Her voice was steady. "And I want that too," I replied. We continued writing until the lantern on the porch flickered to life as night fell. The ocean beyond was a ribbon of darkness and movement. I realized then we weren't chasing what was lost. We were building what remained. Family, but it didn't trust, eh? Love, that has scars, but it's still beautiful. Hannah stood beside me in the gray morning light as we approached the police station. She carried the evidence folder, clutching it with shaking fingers. I could tell she'd rehearsed her brave nod in the mirror, but now, as she stared at the entrance, it felt like standing at the foot of a cliff. She inhaled and nodded. Inside, we met Captain Reyes, a kind-eyed detective who listened as Hannah explained, voice cracking at first, then steadying. Logan Pierce had scammed her, drained joint accounts, isolated her, even planned to vanish with her money. She handed over bank statements, text messages, the secretly recorded video of him rifling through my cabin, and emails from Natalie and Marcus confirming Logan's aliases and offshore wire plans. Captain Reyes took everything silently, scanning each page with a professional nod. Then, as we waited in the lobby, a luxury car pulled up outside. Through the window, I saw a familiar silhouette. Logan's defense attorney, a well-known high-power litigator named Marcus Reeves. He was dressed impeccably and moved toward the station with a confident stride. Within minutes, Reeves was inside, demanding a meeting with the detective. He presented a thick envelope of paperwork, an elaborate complaint accusing me, Elaine Monroe, of orchestrating the entire situation. Allegations included forging trust documents, manipulating Hannah into false testimony, and launching a premeditated fraud scheme targeting a vulnerable elderly daughter for herself. The accusation hit like a bullet. Hannah's breath caught. My heart slowed. She squeezed my hand. "Stay with me," she whispered. Captain Reyes raised an eyebrow and asked Reeves if he had probable cause. Reeves responded with legal jargon and threats citing elder abuse statutes. He claimed I had coached Hannah, planted evidence, and turned a daughter against her husband. Reyes paused and said calmly, "We'll look at everything." We were escorted into an interview room. Reeves wasn't shy. Within minutes, he painted a picture of me as a schemer. He dropped phrases like maternal manipulation, elder exploitation, forged paperwork, and vindictive motherhood. Hannah's face paled. The folder trembled in her lap. She looked at me, eyes wide. My world narrowed. Everything I'd built, woven, sacrificed to protect her, now questioned in a sterile interrogation booth. But I refused to blur beneath doubt. I breathed deeply, let my voice find clarity. I described the trust clause, the 5-year lock clause I had inserted to safeguard the apartment and car. I explained how I had updated the title definitively under my name long before any sale, and how Hannah had signed incomplete documents under pressure from Logan alone. I told the detective that Logan's copy of the deed was fraudulent, signed by a notary with a revoked license, Jeffrey Landers. Then I played the video. Reeves tried to object about admissibility, but Reyes said, "Let's see it." The image flickered. Logan rifling through my filing cabinet, phone camera snapping pictures, calculating attempts to manipulate evidence. We sat in silence until it ended. Next, I submitted sworn statements from Natalie Kerr and the first victim in Arizona, both naming Logan's repeated con artistry and stating they were ready to testify. And then, Reeves's expression shifted. He stood again, intersecting the room's hush. But just before he spoke, Reeves's phone buzzed. A text preview, visible on his locked screen, read, "Meeting canceled. I'm ready to talk. Yes, Emily." Reeves stiffened. "Who is Emily, Ken?" the detective asked. "I don't know," he replied, voice tight. The room stayed still. A minute later, the door opened and another woman was escorted inside, Emily Callahan. She looked younger than Natalie, but carried the same haunted clarity. She was introduced as a former fiancé of Logan's. She stepped forward and said quietly, "Officer, I didn't want to come, but I watched him leave me after I lost my home and was coerced into giving up my daughter's room for rent money." She produced documents, emails, phone logs, photographs of Logan pressuring her to sign over her property, even medical records confirming she had a miscarriage during that period, an outcome that Emily attributed to stress and Logan's harassment. She signed a notarized affidavit accusing Logan of emotional and financial abuse. Silence again. Captain Reyes looked at me. "We'll consider this new testimony as well." Hannah sank in her chair. She looked at me with eyes empty and full all at once. "You were right," she whispered later, voice shaking, "when I said he said he'd love me forever." I touched her hand. "You believed. That's not your fault." The detective declared they would not arrest either of us that day. They would launch a full investigation into both Logan's offenses and the counter-allegations. Reeves's motion would be treated as part of the record, but had not yet proven. We stepped outside the station into the late morning sun. The air felt heavy and bright at once. Hannah leaned into me. "I'm sorry for doubting you." "I'm not," I told her gently. "I'm proud you found your voice." She gazed across the parking lot. "This isn't over." "No." We paused, then we turned and walked away together. In the car, Hannah exhaled deep tears. She said, "We need to prepare. Lawyers, victim statements, media. Maybe. But first, we fight." I looked at her, and for the first time in months, she looked like herself again. Angry, determined, alive. "This time," she said with a breathless smile, "we're doing it together." And we drove home. A late afternoon sun lay low over the courthouse as Logan Pierce was led in, escorted by 2 officers. His posture was calm, his lips curled into that smug half-smile. If he felt fear, he hid it well. Emma, the detective who stood beside me, whispered, "He's still confident." Elaine watched quietly, steady. I stood a few feet behind Hannah, whose pale face was drawn tight but resolute. Logan's gaze found mine for a moment. He nodded, calm, assured, dangerous. Then he turned and climbed the steps, still smiling. Inside the courtroom, the atmosphere was thick with formal justice, but also with the tension of expectation. We prepared for this moment for months, collecting evidence from multiple states, coordinating with prosecutors, compiling sworn statements from Natalie, Emily, Amanda, public records, bank audits, offshore wiring logs. A federal prosecutor sat at the table across from Logan's much larger legal team. His nameplate read, Assistant United States Attorney Grayson Holt. When they called the case, the judge glanced first at Logan, then at the long stack of binders before the U.S. Attorney. "Mr. Pierce," he said evenly, "you stand accused of wire fraud, identity deception, interstate conspiracy to commit financial exploitation of elderly persons. How do you plead?" Logan raised his head, his voice measured. "Not guilty, Your Honor." And with that, he shifted gaze to me. "I'm confident the court will see I'm a victim of reputation assault." He was brash. He wasn't even afraid. But that was where he miscalculated. The U.S. prosecutor called his first witness without hesitation. Natalie Kerr, whose calm yet strong testimony recounted Logan's previous schemes across 2 states, transferring funds, disappearing, abandoning women. She identified him in court. The judge nodded and allowed video exhibits. Then came Emily Callahan. Her statement described emotional abuse and coercion. She broke into tears as she described Logan pressuring her to sell her home and giving up custody of her unborn child. The judge allowed medical reports and email records into evidence. Bystanders in the gallery watched, breath held as Logan's facade cracked, his defenses subtly unraveling. Next came Amanda Porter from Arizona, former partner who lost substantial funds and property. Her testimony confirmed the same pattern: charming entrance, financial isolation, financial collapse, then disappearance. She held the courtroom's gaze as she described her own heartbreak. That was the moment I felt a shift in energy. Logan's network of victims had become a chorus, no longer silent. Then they called me. I walked to the witness stand. My heart fluttered, but my mind was stern. I gave a calm, clear testimony about the 5-year lock clause on the trust, the false documents Hannah had been presented, the intercepted video of Logan inside my home. I explained how I had researched title history, the multiple aliases, the offshore wire plans. I had cross-references and logs. I had lawyers lined up because I understood before he ever realized there was a roadmap. The prosecutor asked Hannah to take the stand. She described how funds disappeared, how she realized Logan never included her on the one-way flight plan, how she discovered the messages, puppet, easy mark. She gave her timeline in calm detail, without tears. When she looked at Logan, she didn't flinch. That made me gasp. My daughter standing strong. Logan's legal team attempted cross-examination. In their politest corporate tone, they tried to paint me as a controlling mother with influence over Hannah. They tried to argue that the victim testimonies were colluding, but they stumbled on facts, photographic timestamps, transferred logs, medical records, notarized affidavits, and then they hit the immovable obstacle. The flight booking with only one seat. The ticket was confirmed, issued 2 days before the apartment sale. It was immaterial in a domestic court, but in this federal proceeding, it painted him as a fleeing defendant. Each piece they tried to cast doubt on, prosecutors had already backed up with third-party records, title documents, offshore wire audit trails, registered statements filed in 2 states. Each victim's identity had been confirmed, alias histories matched, behavior patterns consistent. Logan's smile faded with each testimony. At one point, he shifted in his seat and cleared his throat. His defense team whispered rapidly under their breaths. By late afternoon, the prosecutor rested. The courtroom was quiet. The judge peered over his glasses. "Mr. Pierce," he said, "your bail is revoked. You will remain in custody. Trial is scheduled in 90 days. This court finds probable cause that the interstate conspiracy endangers public safety." Logan looked at me again. His face was pale, his bravado gone. I heard him mutter something, barely audible. "You'll all forgive me eventually." But it was too late. After the hearing, Harrison Airport lay outside with their bright lights. I felt rooted. Hannah was near. Prosecutors were signing subpoenas, records being grounded, immigration liaison reviewing wirepaths. Federal fraud unit confirmed his name matched multiple aliases and that warrants were being issued statewide. At that meeting later, U.S. Attorney Holt turned to me and said, "You've brought us a cross-state pattern that feeds into a national network of elder fraud. We believe there's more to uncover." He placed a file on the desk. "You understand what this means?" "Yes," I said, voice tight. "No more hiding." Driving back, Hannah and I were quiet in the back seat of my sedan. She looked at me, exhaustion and relief mixed. "Mom, thank you. You did this," I said. I only held the line. She reached for my hand and squeezed it. And for a moment, all my silent sacrifices felt honored. That evening, a small press contingent had gathered outside Logan's lawyer's office. Smartphones and recorders closed in. Amanda, Natalie, Emily, and Hannah were interviewed as witnesses. Amanda spoke. "It took me years to rebuild trust. I know there are others. He's not done." Natalie added, "I want more women to recognize the signs." Even Emily's voice, terse but firm, echoed as legal action, not shame. Hannah stood quietly, poised. She looked directly into the mic and said simply, "He's not my husband anymore." Someone asked me to say something. I looked into the lens and said, "This is not about revenge, it's about truth. And if one family's truth can protect another, then every silent sacrifice was worth it." That evening, I sat at home, tea in hand, pen hovering over my journal. I paused, wrote one line, "Justice isn't loud, it's inevitable." In the final chapter, I realized victory wasn't in seeing him convicted. It was in seeing my daughter standing tall. It was in reclaiming home. It was in turning my love into boundaries. And that, finally, felt like freedom. The courthouse felt different that morning, heavy with anticipation. Every bench seat felt padded with electric tension. Logan was in the dock again, this time next to defense counsel. His posture was unusually docile, almost nervous, under the harsh courtroom lights. The judge called the session to order. Today was witness day. Hannah Monroe's turn to testify. I watched from the gallery as she was sworn in. Her face was pale, framed by dark hair, eyes bright with fear and determination. She walked to the stand slowly. Defense counsel, Reeves, sat rigid, his gaze fixed on her. The prosecutor began with soft questions: name, relationship to defendant, reason for presence. Hannah answered clearly, "I'm Logan's ex-wife. I'm here because I saw things no wife should see." She described how funds disappeared and how she discovered the messages calling her a puppet, the one-way flight. Her voice was steady. There were nods from the jury. Then Reeves began cross-examination, his tone measured and icy. He asked about her relationship history, her financial contributions, and why she moved in with her mother earlier. She answered honestly. Each reply only underscored her vulnerability and truth. Then came the twist. Reeves placed an envelope on the table and leaned forward. "Ms. Monroe, before you continue, are you aware that your mother is withholding evidence? That there exists a video, intimate in nature, starring you and your husband? One that could suggest motives other than financial exploitation?" Hannah froze. The courtroom murmured. I watched her face drain of color. He continued, "This video was taken consensually, but its possible release could destroy reputations and may very well show a different side of your marriage." She trembled, eyes brimming with tears. I don't want it shown." Reeves replied calmly, "It's my client's evidence. He has the right to present it unless you object or the court deems it irrelevant." The judge called for a short recess. I rose slowly, crossing to the defense table as the gallery stirred. Logan's eyes met mine, cold, calculating. In the hallway, I saw Hannah crying, trembling. I held her arm gently and whispered, "You can do this." We returned. The judge resumed session. The judge addressed me. "Mrs. Monroe, defense is planning to introduce a video. Is that correct?" I nodded. "Yes, Your Honor." I stood by my voice, aware all eyes were on me. That video is not evidence of wrongdoing. It's evidence of trust betrayed, of a wife manipulated. If it shows anything, it proves she believed in him, because no predator would have dared otherwise. The courtroom was silent. Even Reeves shifted. The judge studied us. Finally, he nodded and said, "Defense may introduce the video. Ms. Monroe, you may proceed." I rose again. The courtroom leaned forward. "This video is in Logan Pierce's possession. It features private moments, nothing criminal by itself. My daughter was naive, taken in. If anything, allowing it to be seen publicly would serve the public interest. It shows how convincingly he duped her. Not to shame her or me, but to show how real this is." He tried to interrupt. The judge allowed me to finish. A moment later, the state prosecutor requested that detectives confirm Logan's possession qualifies as witness tampering or extortion. The judge paused. "Defense," he began. "Does your client acknowledge withholding video content that could influence testimony?" Reeves' face tightened. "Not extortion, Your Honor." The judge frowned. "Provide the video to the court under seal. Any action taken by Mr. Pierce to threaten the release or utilize it to influence testimony will be treated as witness tampering." In that moment, Logan's eyes flicked to Hannah. I saw the flicker of his smirk, but then it vanished under the weight of the judge's words. When Hannah returned to testify, she spoke firmly. "He threatened me with its release, but I won't be silenced." The judge allowed the video to be submitted confidentially, not shown publicly, but logged. I passed Hannah a small handheld tissue. She pressed it to her eyes. We returned to the gallery as murmurs spread. Outside later, Reeves declined comment. A statement from the prosecutor's office revealed they were preparing amended charges against Logan, witness tampering and extortion alongside existing charges of fraud. That evening, Hannah and I found ourselves at a small bakery. 2 stools at the counter, the scent of fresh bread and pastries around us. We had no words at first, only the clinking of mugs and the cozy hush of closing time. Then Hannah pointed at a blank page in my journal. "Mom, what now?" I glanced at her, stronger now, more herself. "We write him in," I said softly. She looked confused. I explained, "Next to your name or mine, we write Logan Pierce, predator of elderly women, public warning. It's symbolic, but it reminds us we fought and this ends with truth." She nods, pulling a pen from her bag. Together, we inscribe his name on the page, followed by the phrase, "To be shared with support groups and elder care networks." Her hand shakes for a moment, then steadies. We close the journal, stand together, and walk out. The bakery's bell chimes. Outside, the night is cool. Streetlights glow over the silent sidewalks. We pause. She looks at me and says, "We did it." I squeeze her hand. "Yes, sweetheart." We walk home.